20% off homebrew ingredients. That's right, during the month of April, Desiree and Dave of HighGravityBrew.com are offering 20% off all homebrew ingredients to Basic Brewing Radio listeners. You know HighGravityBrew.com is the place to go to take the pain out of propane with awesome electric brewing systems, but they've also got an incredible inventory of ingredients to make your next beer amazing. Just use the promo code BBApril2021. That's not case sensitive, so you can, your choice on what you want to capitalize. BBApril2021 at HighGravityBrew.com, and you can save 20% off your homebrew ingredient order. Use the fun and easy build your own beer feature on HighGravityBrew.com and enter the promo code BBApril2021. That's BBApril2021 and save 20% at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 8th, 2021. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Jeff Hollander, CEO of Hairless Dog Brewing, talks about brewing non-alcoholic beer that actually tastes like craft beer. I'll have Steve do a blind tasting. Will he miss the alcohol? Stay tuned. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. And if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewer's logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And very much thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter, including bonus videos that nobody else will see. I kegged my Mexican-style lager a couple days ago already, and it really tastes awesome. It's mostly Pilsner malt, but I put in some Vienna, some 10 Lovibond Munich, and some flaked maize in there too, and bittered with a couple ounces of Czech Sats at the beginning of this the 60-minute boil. My basement is still at around 58 degrees Fahrenheit. That's around 14 C, I think. So I did a no-chill and set the wort down there in the basement to cool off to that temperature. And then the next day, I pitched the seasonal yeast from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. That's L09 Que Bueno. And I tell you that Que Bueno made short work of that wort. It had a starting gravity of 1051, and 3 days after pitching, I checked on it, and the yeast was already flocking out. It was already done. and that Que Bueno, it falls out like a rock. So I moved it upstairs quickly for a diacetyl rest and swirled the yeast back up into suspension. I wanted to make sure it was nice and clean. I kegged it 4 days later, and here it is a couple days after that, and it's clean as a whistle. It tastes really good. A tasty lager in a week and a half. That's pretty good in my mind. Imperial L09 Que Bueno is available through the end of May. With a pitching rate of 200 billion cells, my stir plate is dusty because I don't make starters anymore for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches, even lagers. Ask your local homebrew store for Imperial Organic Yeast. Check them out at imperialyeast.com and ask them through May for L09 Que Bueno. Let's take a look into the mailbag. Jacob from Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada writes, been meaning to ask someone smarter than myself this one for a while. Well, and yet he wrote to me. Jacob says, my mom taught me to rehydrate bread yeast in warm water with sugar whenever making bread, and it always worked great. So this was a technique that I brought to brewing. I usually rehydrate my dry yeast in some warm water with sugar with decent results. Then I switched to liquid yeasts and harvesting yeast slurry and use the same method of pitching my harvested yeast after it's been in the fridge a few weeks into warm water with sugar dissolved in it to ensure the yeast wakes up and can ferment and doesn't smell funky. Jacob says, now I've heard that rehydrating yeast in sugar water can be stressful on the yeast cell or make it lazy. but I always figured I was making a cheater starter with the sugar water and helping give the yeast a boost, or the beast a yeast. The beer turns out just fine, so I'm not too worried about it, but curious for your 2 cents. Well, I've forwarded Jacob's question to someone whose input is worth way more than 2 cents. That's Casey from Imperial Organic Yeast. And Casey says, for dry yeast, rehydrate according to the manufacturer's recommendations. For liquid yeast, if you're storing the yeast for longer than a week or two between batches, say that's if you harvest your yeast, and you want to ensure the yeast is alive and well, I recommend making a starter with dry malt extract. Casey says if you introduce the yeast to a sugar solution and the yeast takes off, it could drop the pH of the solution too much, creating a toxic environment for the yeast. If you're brewing pretty regularly and using yeast within a week or two, tops, then you should be able to repitch directly, no starter needed. Just be sure that you're repitching by weight, about 200 grams per 5-gallon standard gravity wort. So there you go. Don't use sugar to wake up your yeast slurry. Use dry malt extract, according to Casey from Imperial Organic Yeast. It's awesome to know people who know more than you do. And thanks to Jacob for the question. And as always, thanks to Casey from Imperial Yeast for the expertise. Hey, there's fun news from Ricky and Kelly at Groenfell Meadery in Vermont. Havoc Root of All Evil Maple Edition is back for a limited time. This is a special edition of the Ginger Mead Root of All Evil with more than 250 pounds of maple-infused ginger from Runamuck Maple in Fairfax, Vermont. That's in addition to Havoc's custom blend of ginger and fresh lemon. So that'll put some spice in your springtime. Woo! At 6.9% ABV, it's fairly sessionable, at least in terms of craft meads. And in most of the country, if you go to groenfell.com, you can have it shipped directly to you. Groenfell and Havoc have a wide selection of deliciously drinkable honey beverages, and they're longtime friends and supporters of the show. So take a moment to check out Root of All Evil Maple Edition with, what did I say, 250 pounds of maple, in addition to the regular amount of ginger, 250 pounds of maple-infused ginger. Wow, that sounds delicious. Check it all out at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's Groennfell. Okay, let's talk to Jeff Hollander of Hairless Dog Brewing Company about brewing alcohol-free craft beer that you actually want to drink. Jeff Hollander, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you are, I guess, the first manufacturer of non-alcoholic beer that we've had on the show. We've had a home brewer back in Brock Masters back in January of 2018, if people want to look in the archives. A home brewer who tried to make a non-alcoholic beer. It tasted good, but according to my breathalyzer, it wasn't actually non-alcoholic. So there's interest out there in home brewers trying to make a non-alcoholic beer. So I'm hoping that by talking to you, we can see whether it's possible to make a good tasting non-alcoholic beer, and then get a little bit of peek behind the scenes of, what goes into to making it.
Happy to do what I can. So
first of all, give me some backstory. I mean, who are you and your partner, Paul Perner, who founded Hairless Dog? Talk about give us your elevator pitch. Who are you? Where did you come from? And what was your relationship to beer before you started this company?
Well, thanks for having me. And Paul and I have been old friends, and a lot of our social settings, like so many of us, were based around the casual consumption of alcohol. Beer obviously was at the heart of that. As two beer fans, Paul is a home brewer by he's been doing it for decades, and so we when we both quit drinking for our own reasons, we just decided that that it wasn't going to work for us, we ran into each other and sort of reconnected at a holiday party. And both of us noticed that the other didn't have a drink in their hands. We were the only ones. And so we started talking about, what's your favorite non-alcoholic beer? What's your go-to? What's your favorite sparkling water? And the whole conversation just evolved really naturally around, like, isn't it weird how you have to have a beer in your hands in order to be in a social setting? Why is that? You have to have a drink in your hands or people think something's wrong with you. So the conversation as to why non-alcoholic beer very much was spearheaded out of just that one simple encounter that we had about 4 years ago, probably 4 years ago now.
And how did that, I mean, he's a home brewer, so had he been experimenting with making either reduced alcohol or non-alcoholic beers?
Oh, no. Paul was known. Paul and I approach home brewing with a reverence and sort of like the mystery of it is very much that, a mystery to me. I don't understand. You know, he understands, however, as a home brewer, how it all came together, because when Paul made the black ale, his signature brew, people would come around from in the alley and so forth, because Paul would be brewing out of his garage. So people would come out with their growlers because they had gotten wind that Paul had just brewed 8 gallons of his black ale. So I too would walk down there with a growler and I'd fill it up and then take it back to my place and marvel at how great it was. Interestingly enough, the black ale was our first brew that we launched when we were first getting on the market back in 2018, and still remains one of our flagship products to this day.
Yeah, you're up in beer country up there in Minneapolis. You know, there's lots of good beer up there.
There is. Yeah, there is. It's very much, I mean, it's the home of our favorite brews. And as kids, the brands that our grandparents consumed are still, you can find those legacy brands still on billboards and old signs. And while the brewery might be gone, the legacy of beer drinking culture remains in Minnesota for sure.
So we've had a couple of friends of mine on the show in the past who have gone non-alcoholic for, catastrophic health reasons.
Sure.
But what led you to that decision? I mean, what brought you down that path? If I'm not getting too personal.
Not at all. Not at all. I realize I'm 46 right now, and when I was probably in my upper 30s, I started to say, you know what? I just feel better when I don't have alcohol. That was just a decision that I made as a person. I was probably 37 when I started taking like 90 days off and a month off and things like that. And then I liked the way I felt. Neither Paul or I are against alcohol. We're not. We don't say it's a bad thing for you. Our company's not anti-alcohol, but we each made this. Neither of us have a story around giving up alcohol that is tragic, and our hearts go out to those that have had to say goodbye to alcohol for health reasons or mental health reasons or legal reasons or what have you. Neither Paul or I have a story like that. We just decided independently of each other. For me personally, I decided that I just felt better without it. So one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to go 60 days, no problem. And then at the end of 60 days, I'm going to go 90. And then I was like, I'm going to try a year. And so then it's been about 6 years of no alcohol for me, and I just decided that it works better for me. As to what led us to choosing this product, back at that time when we first started having the conversation about why we would make non-alcoholic beer, there was just nothing really out there. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of the big players, and nobody was really dabbling in this field. So Paul decided to take his home brewing experience, and we started with a few small batches. We found a co-packer that would take a chance on us and brew a couple thousand cases, and they were gone instantly in the metro area. I reached out to a few retailers and I said, would you be interested in carrying something like this? There is no alcohol in it. They said, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And they would call maybe 2 weeks later, like, you got to bring more of that stuff to us. I was getting emails from around the country. When is it going to be available in Oregon and Washington and California and New York? And I was like, I think we have a hit on our hands and we need to scale.
Mm. And so I mean, what was the experimentation process like? And I'll try to pry some details after. We have a little clip of Steve and me tasting here in just a minute, but I want to pry some details from you about the process afterwards. But what was the process of trying to learn how to do this? I mean, did you start on, small scale, at home, or how did that work?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you ask, because I always get a chuckle when I think about those days, because Paul would dig deep into the journals that he would find on like how to make non-alcoholic beer, the different methods. And he'd say, I think I got it. I think that if we try X, Y, and Z, I think we might get into the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and he'd lay it all out. And I'm in marketing by trade. So a lot of I was kind of shrugging, and I was like, dude, whatever you say, if you say it's going to work, I'm going to follow you 100%. And someday I will prove to you my worth, but just not right at this moment, because I'm completely useless. But he was trying a lot of stuff in his kitchen and in his garage, and I would come over, and then and we'd taste him like, yeah, not quite right. And we'd try, all right, I'm going to try a few things. And then this one, I'm going to try carbonating. And then I'm going to, let me see what I come up with. And then we'd come back and not quite right, over and over and over again. One day I was sitting in his kitchen, and he poured a glass of the black ale for me. And again, this is probably 2017, about 4 years ago. And maybe not quite. And he poured a glass for me, and I was like, dude, I think I feel drunk. And he's like, it doesn't have any alcohol in it. And I'm like, if it's cueing the flavor cues are tricking my brain, because your brain is saying, oh, I know what to do with that. When I taste that, this is how I'm supposed to feel. I'm like, I like what this is doing, and I think that this is what we need to scale. So the process of experimentation, Paul, has been very much it's been very close to his heart, and he leads a R&D team that really understands the process and makes sure it's the best it can be. We're constantly refining where we're going as a company and our process and our flavors. We're excited to say that over the next month or so, we're going to have some exciting news around that, including new styles. So Hairless Dog wants very much to lead the conversation about that an NA, a great, truly 0.0 NA, is possible.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our friends and sponsors at Tavour. If you listen to the show, you know about Tavour. It's a way to select delicious craft beers that you may not be able to find in your area and have them delivered to you. It's not a Beer of the Month club where someone else chooses the beer for you. You only pay for the beer that you choose over the course of the month. Signing up for Tavour is free. Just create an account at Tavour.com. That's T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com. And download their iPhone or Android app, and you'll receive notifications for 2 new beers each day that are available for purchase with in-depth tasting notes from Philip at Tavour. This month, look for Tripping Animals, Trim Tab, Southern Grist, Shades Brewing, Magnify Brewing, Spinal Tap, Wild Barrel, and Texas Ale Project. If you're not interested in the beers you see, no worries. Just skip the ones you don't want. However, when you see something that you do want, don't wait. Just click on it and add it to your crate. Your beer arrives fresh every few weeks, allowing you enough time to fill a box and pay the least shipping. Why don't you check it out? It doesn't cost anything to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase anything. In fact, if I can ask you a favor, go to Tavour.com, T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or download the app. And when you sign up, enter the promo code Basic Brewing, all one word. That's Basic Brewing, and you'll get $10 off your first shipment of $25 or more. Again, it's free to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase. Sign up at Tavour.com, T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or with the Tavour app, and enter Basic Brewing as the promo code. Well, I invited my friend Steve Wilkes over to the house, and he brought a couple of his meads over for us to taste. And whenever Steve and I get together, and we haven't been able to physically get together for an extended period of time, since this whole thing, that we've been having for the last year. But we got out it was a nice sunny day, so we sat out on the porch. And I sprung this on him. I felt like I was in a Pepsi challenge ad from the 70s or something, or we've replaced these people's coffee with Folgers crystals, So it was a blind tasting. He didn't know anything about the beverage except the name of the style and the city that it was from. And I just wanted to kind of see what he thought. So here goes the tasting. Here's about 10 minutes of Steve Wilkes and me on the windy porch drinking some Hairless Dog. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be back.
We're here in person.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Socially distanced.
We are socially distanced.
Out here on the porch.
Yes, you're in Oklahoma. We take our social distancing quite seriously.
The wind is blowing across the microphone a little bit. We'll see if I can't do something about that. There, I'll point it this way. That helps a little bit. We got a dog on the porch, so it is Arkansas.
Dog on the porch.
And my wife Susan is digging in the yard. It's down home week here.
It is.
So you've just come out since the weather's nice. You've just come out to spend some time out on the porch.
We haven't just sat and had a beer together. I don't know when the last time was.
I can't remember. It's been.
We've done it virtually.
Yeah, but it's been at least a year.
Yeah,
safe to say.
Goodness gracious!
So what we have in front of us is 3 beers from a brewery in Minneapolis. I can say that much.
Okay.
I've kept everything from you except for what the styles that each of them are. We've got a Citra Lager, we have a Black Ale, and then we have an IPA. And we've got them in separate glasses here, or cups. We have little sample cups. And so what are your? Let's start with the Citra Lager. Let's have a sample of the Citra Lager.
Well, it definitely tastes Citra hops. I mean, that's what this beer's about.
It's nice and clean. Very drinkable.
Very drinkable.
I could drink a bunch of it.
Yeah. This is all about the Citra. So it's just bright and refreshing and great summertime beer.
Very clean, well fermented. I can taste I can taste the grain. There's kind of a breadiness a little bit to the grain.
Yeah, but the grain, everything else is secondary to the Citra in the beer. I mean, the malt is a placeholder. I would say, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I just mean that the star of the show is the Citra, and so the star of the show could have been Mosaic, or it could have been any other prominent hop that people like to feature, and would have been just fine. So, kudos to the brewer for providing what I'll call a neutral grain palette to feature the hop on.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And then we have the Black Ale, and I get kind of a molassesy, roasty character, I would say.
A little bit, but I think it's very subdued. I don't think the color is more important than the flavor. In other words, I see a dark beer and so my mind wants it to be about dark malts and heavier, but it's actually a light. It drinks very light. So yeah, it's in that sense it's like a 1554 if you've had that from New Belgium. Yeah. It's the only one I can come up with off the top of my head.
It's not roasty like a porter or a stout.
No.
It's more 1550. Yeah, that's a good comparison because it is a black ale.
And
fairly clean.
Yeah.
Man.
And the other thing is that the hop selection in this, again, is real bright for me. And so I was expecting a more earthy, kind of an English hops sort of thing, Fuggle. What I'm tasting, frankly, is kind of that bright, really bright, fresh, refreshing kind of Citra hop again. Now, I don't know if it's Citra or not, but it's really a bright hop character in the beer, and I wasn't really expecting that. It's good, tastes really good, but it's unexpected.
Now, I've moved on to the IPA, and I've got to say, it's in all fairness, it's not the hoppiest IPA that I've ever had.
No,
but I think it's a very approachable, IPA. It's got a nice level of bitterness. I'm used to like Bell's Two Hearted and and Rockhound out of Little Rock, which are very.
Right.
There's tons of it's a hop love. Those are hop lovers.
Yeah,
IPAs
or Avery.
This one is a very. It's been a while since I've had an Avery, but yeah, along those lines. This is it's got a nice solid level of bitterness. It's nice and clean and crisp. And I would definitely drink a pint of this and be happy.
It's a more complex beer than the first beer, but it's not very different from the first beer to me. I can tell that there's a more complex hop build in it. The bittering, up front, or I should say, the bittering hop is more earthy and I don't know what the right word is. Solid. There's a real solid bitter backbone to it, but it's not very strong. And then it resolves into that kind of bright, crisp, bitter character. And I would say this about all three beers. I think all three beers, the way that they're hopped, is very similar. I really felt like all three beers are, definitely from the same brewery and from the same brewer, who has the same, I'll call it instinct in how he or she decided to hop these beers, because they're very closely related palate-wise.
I went back to the Citra, and it is a lot more citrusy.
It's definitely a Citra hopped beer, and it's very citrus. And in that sense, it's very one-dimensional. So the IPA is not one-dimensional.
Right. There's more layers of hoppiness in there.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
However,
but the bitterness level is about, the bitterness of the IPA is a little bit more, but it's not, knock yourself,
right.
Someone who would turn up their nose at American IPAs would be more approachable with this one, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I'd say the same thing with the black lager. Or black ale.
So I feel like this is the Pepsi challenge. So, Steve, what if I were to tell you that this is from Hairless Dog Brewing Company, and these are alcohol-free? They're non-alcoholic beers.
I'm very surprised. Wow.
So, these don't take. I mean, I've had like O'Doul's, and I've had one or two other non-alcoholic beers, and they're lifeless,
right, and
just not beery. These I would drink.
These are great.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
I'm interested. I'm going to be talking to these guys, and I'm interested to know what their process is. How they get the alcohol out. Well, thanks, Steve. This has been an interesting experiment, and so I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly. Of course, I knew that they were non-alcohol going in. So.
Well, I'm just absolutely stunned. I don't know what I would have said if you'd tell me the ABV on them. I don't know what I would have said because I didn't think they were strong.
Yeah.
I was so focused on analyzing the hops that I didn't even think about the alcohol. I just wanted to order some more Mugugugu. and
more goo to go.
More goo to go.
All right, Steve.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So there you go, Jeff. It tastes like a beer.
Well, that's a positive assessment. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we tasted it. Of course, I wasn't blind because I knew what it was, but Steve didn't know what he was tasting, and at no point did he say, "Hey, this tastes like a soft drink," or "This doesn't taste like a beer," or he didn't. I didn't ask him, how many ABVs do you think are in there or anything. What he was commenting on was the flavor of the hops and the flavor of the malt. And, it tastes like a beer. And I took some of these to another, safely distanced gathering at a friend's house, and I let them sample some of it, and they liked it as well. And I had a couple, and there is one side effect that I think you might be aware of. After I drank a couple of these, I wasn't inclined to tell, off-color jokes. My wife didn't punch me in the arm for saying something stupid. There's there's a side effect, that I don't get when I drink a couple of 7% IPAs. But so it's a tasty product, and I had one of the Citra lagers with some fajitas here at the house the other night. So it's something that I would like to drink, which is what I can't say of O'Doul's and other quote unquote non-alcoholic beers that I've had in the past. So congratulations.
Thanks so much. And you talk about side effects of drinking Hairless Dog. There's one really important one. Drinking Hairless Dog may cause remembering. So just a word to the wise. It also, you might sound smarter in a party and do more sensible things, and I realize that's not for everybody.
And your friends might sound dumber than usual. So, not saying that happened the other night. So now's the time where I try to pry some details. I know there's a lot of proprietary stuff going on. But when you first started, you said you partnered with a packaging company. Did you partner with a brewery to make the first round of the commercially available product?
We did. We found a brewery it's a small scale brewery, and they had access to what we thought was the right equipment that would probably get us there at least for a test run. And then ran a few thousand cases. We were more of an annoyance, I think, to them. We're like, "Hey, how's the non-alcoholic beer coming?" And they're like, "You really think you have a go-to market strategy with this stuff?" I was like, "I think people are gonna drink it. I don't know." So they were nice enough to give us a small run, and then after that sold right away, we needed to scale with a much bigger co-packer in the Midwest. So our model is based around co-packing because as we grow and as we scale, we have to be able to take our process to a co-packer and who can fulfill the order for us. Because frankly, as you know, the NA market is a small but loyal segment. Mm-hmm. In order to capture, a segment that you need as a company in order to be profitable, you have to have a big footprint. So going nationwide is very much part of our business strategy. I don't think I'm telling anything secret there. But as far as the process itself that you had warned me you were going to pry about, have you seen the Bad News Bears where the kid thinks he's got the ball, he's catching a pop fly, and he's running, he's backing up, and then he runs into a fence or something? That's exactly what it's like when I try to describe making beer to people. I think I got it. Everything looks good, and then all of a sudden I go right off a cliff. So that's what I'm afraid I'm going to do. So I'll do the best I can speaking about our process.
Now, first of all, in order to be labeled as non-alcoholic currently in the United States, you have to have an alcohol content of less than 5%. I think that's correct. Or less than 0.5%. Oh, decimal points, they count.
Yeah. They make all the difference, we found out.
It turns out, which is not, why I'm a journalist and not an accountant. But less than 0.5% of alcohol, you can be considered non-alcoholic. On your can, it says 0.0% alcohol. How do you get no alcohol?
Well, we don't ferment. That's
So you don't have any to begin with.
Right. We never introduced alcohol in the first place. We used to be kind of cagey with that detail when we first came out. We were like, oh man, if we say we don't ferment, then our secret is given. And there's so much in our process that really, through so much trial and error, that our process is quite protected from the perspective of it's not something that you can just break open and figure out. Although your listeners, I know, we respectfully, they know so much about home brewing, they could, you say you're not fermented, and already the ideas start going. But yeah, we actually don't introduce alcohol in the first place. So we've experimented with that model for a really long time. How can we basically create a beer without introducing alcohol? And what's funny is your point earlier. You had said that, hey, my friend didn't realize that there was no alcohol in it. Most people in blind taste testings think that we say, how much alcohol do you think is in it? Time and time again, people say 6 to 8%.
Wow.
That for people just think, their brain just says 6%, 7%, 8%, but that's the range that we hear. Very seldom do they say 0, and they might guess 0 only because we're asking. You wouldn't be asking the question unless you were, had a sort of a punchline, because they'll say, "Oh, I'm guessing 0." But most people say we'll guess alcohol. They think there's alcohol in there, and we think that's actually a testament to what we're doing.
So is it just beer ingredients, malt, water, hops, but then the fourth ingredient is left out, the yeast?
The fourth ingredient is actually love.
Okay, Mr. Marketer.
That came from my grandmother, who used to say that her cookies were made. One of the ingredients was love, so that's an homage to her. We do put love in all of our products. Our process does emulate the traditional beer brewing process, with a few steps drastically changed. So the variables have taken so much time to understand, and we feel like we're finally at a point where we really, really understand how to make the best beer possible with that process, right? Mm-hmm. Certain styles of beer will lend themselves better than others. And so we know now we are working within the confines of a certain process and the limitless, nature of the process too. We want to make the best non-alcoholic beers possible with that process. And there's no fermentation.
So without fermentation, I mean, can you say if there's a mash or not? Because it seems like if you're extracting sweet wort, then what you would have is a sweet product, and this is not sweet. Unless you're like making a wort that's extremely low gravity, but even then, it would taste thin. But this doesn't really taste thin,
right? Well, here's what I can do. I need to text my business partner and find out if that is proprietary. But I will say you are on the right track from the perspective of in order to get the mouthfeel right and the head retention right, because you can't fake You can't fake the mouthfeel. I've had some great non-alcoholic beers that are too thin. I've had great non-alcoholic beers that don't hold that head nicely. You can't trick the brain into thinking that you're drinking a full strength beer without those things. So yes, we are doing what it takes to achieve, because we too realize that as far as it has to emulate a quote unquote real beer or a full strength beer, as much as possible. So you got to get the mouthfeel and you got to get the head retention right.
And I'm assuming that there's a boil involved in the process, because there's a nice level of bittering, along with a nice level of, dry hopping, I'm assuming, as well, or late process hoppings, because like Steve said, the IPA is, it's multi-layered in its hoppiness. The Citra Lager, which I got to say is my favorite. I would just drink that. It's really the hoppiness. The Citra hops are really nice and prominent and fresh, and it's just, I love that flavor. So there's got to be some dry hopping there as well. I'm assuming. So any details you can release about about that part?
Yeah. Well, that I don't think is all that coveted. I mean, we emulate traditional brewing methods just as much as anyone. We of course must boil, dry hopping, things like that. Those are all present in our process, absolutely. But a very quick funny story. A very quick
I'll be the
story
judge
I
of
can
that.
promise yeah, right. I can't promise it's going to be funny, but I can promise it's going to be quick. The Citra Lager was originally a mistake. The Citra Lager was supposed to be an IPA. When we were bottling and hand stickering, when we were first getting started, we're like, let's make an IPA. So it came out of the finish line, or the finished product arrived. And we had 1,000 cases of it or more, which we thought at that time was just an insurmountable amount of product. And it didn't taste like an IPA. We're like, it's a little hoppy, but it's just not quite there. And so I said, the marketer in me was like, you know what? It's not an IPA. It's a summer lager. So we put it on. We relabeled it, and it ended up being summer ale. Summer ale is what we called it, and it ended up being our. Everyone loved it. So that served as a footprint for the Citra Lager.
It's like I say, it's really tasty. And we've been you all were kind enough to send us a case of this stuff, which we're grateful for that. And we've been sampling from the fridge.
There's a bill coming too. I wasn't sure if you saw the invoice for it. It hasn't hit your inbox yet.
That's a sales technique I haven't heard of in the COD.
I'm teasing.
No, it's delicious stuff, and I'm grateful for you to send it, because I would have been skeptical otherwise. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting, as they say. So right now you say you want to go nationwide, and I guess in a way you are, because people can buy it online, right?
Yeah, and you can find us in retailers throughout the country as well. I want to say, if you count our retail footprint as well, we're in 35 or 40 states.
Oh, wow.
So we're close, but we won't have distribution there, but we'll have a retailer that's buying from us directly or something like that. But yeah, online has been a very important source of revenue for our company. Absolutely.
And what's your URL?
And since we're 00, what's that?
What's your address? Your web address?
Oh, I was going to say the address where I'm in. Are you going to send that bill back to me now, or what's going on?
Yeah, just waiting to see what you get.
The address is drinkhairlessdog.com.
There you go. And what other? We've got the IPA now, and the Citra Lager, and then the black ale. What else is in the works?
Well, we have 3 new styles that we've been working on for a while. We've done a little bit of tweaking to some of our recipes, so look for maybe some changes, improvements, things like that throughout the summer. And as far as new styles, while I can't tell you exactly what they are, I can promise you that you'll be the first to learn about them as we, as our competent marketing team will keep you posted. But and make sure you have samples. But we just feel that this category hasn't gotten any love, and the consumer that drinks non-alcoholic beer they want choices just like anything else. So in the craft beer world, you can find anything you want, and it's a lifetime of study and of treasuring a moment with your favorite non-alcoholic beer that has not to this day existed for those that, like to your friend, the situation with your friend, has to drink non-alcoholic beer for health reasons, or simply chooses to live a more mindful lifestyle. It just hasn't been available until now.
Are there any details that I can pry out of you, on the process or anything that, I think that we've given enough clues to our homebrewers out there that might set them down the road of experimentation. But anything else, any hints that you can give?
Well, I know that your listeners are very bright about this subject, so you give them a little bit, and to me, it's not a lot. But I'm sure they've already got figured out how they can make their own non-alcoholic beer. To be honest with you, as the CEO of the company, I stay largely into the, I'm a bit out of the fold with the actual process. I know just enough to misquote and say something incorrect and then sending everybody in one direction. And it's like, I got that wrong. We changed that 2.5 years ago. We don't do that anymore. But I will say that the spirit of innovation and the spirit, the culture around love of craft beer is very much a part of Hairless Dog. We as a company are beer fans. We love the attitude of a really, of a over-the-top hoppy, IPA or what have you, just as much as everybody else. And we're committed to using traditional brewing methods to the as closely as we can. And home brewing methods, in fact, which is very much where we got our start. We're a company that started off home brewing first, and we're committed to creating a spectacular non-alcoholic beer experience that is rooted in traditional beer methods.
Well, it's encouraging that we don't have to have like a vacuum chamber or anything like that at at home to brew a tasty non-alcoholic beer-based beverage. So, in that way, this has been very enlightening and fun. And so, I appreciate the time, and I appreciate your sending along the samples.
The pleasure's mine. Thanks so much for your time.
Well, thanks again to Jeff. If you have questions about Hairless Dog's process, send me an email, and I'll shoot them to Jeff. And Jeff says, if there's enough interest, maybe we can get Paul on the show to get him to clue us in more about the process that they use. It's tasty stuff. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.